inspiration behind learning to love me was about taking the parts of myself that I did like and highlighting them. You know, we as people tend to pay attention to the bad. We pay attention to the things that don't work out. You know, we have this focus on the negative, when in reality I think there's a lot more good than bad in the world. We just don't always hear about it. And for me, you know, I'm an artist, I'm a singer, I'm a writer. I started to allow my self-esteem to come from those parts of myself rather than what I looked like or other people's, you know, perception of me. I think I found myself through my art, and so that's where my self-esteem comes from. I think it's never good when all your self-esteem is coming from something as superficial as how you look or something like that. You've got to dig a little deeper, and you've got to find something about you that not everyone has, that not everyone can do, that makes you special, and you have to love that part and allow that to be what's important rather than focusing on what you don't like. I think learning to love yourself does come with a little bit of what I spoke about in 93 Days, which is this radical acceptance of this is who you are. You have two choices. You can either embrace it or you can try to change. And we don't really change. You can certainly live a lie and go with that, but at the end of the day, I think that the more honest you are with yourself, the happier you are, and therefore the more self-love you have. I also think, you know, for me, just going back for a second to elephant in the room, I didn't realize that before I could love another person, I had to fill the hole that I was feeling with myself until I could be fully committed in a relationship with that person and give them everything. I didn't realize that the reason I couldn't do that was because I hadn't done it for me yet. And a huge part of learning to love me is this idea that you have to be okay with yourself. You have to give yourself a pat on the back. You have to give yourself a high five before you can support or love anybody else. Learning to love me was also about a learning disability that I had that I was unaware of until much later in my life in school. But I remember one story. I was in about second grade, I would say, and, you know, the teachers have you read paragraphs. You know, you'll be reading something in class and each kid has to read a paragraph. And I had an enormous amount of anxiety, and so I would always count how many kids were in front of me so that I could practice my paragraph before, reading. And if I didn't know a word, I would almost always get up or go to the bathroom or do something so that I would be skipped. But this one day, I didn't really have time, and I was caught off guard, and I went to go read a paragraph, and I pronounced the word island as island, and I think it's a mistake that a lot of kids make. It's certainly an easy one to make if you're just looking at the word, but the entire class laughed at me, and I was so just ashamed in that moment that I didn't know how to say that word. And everyone was laughing, and I kind of did the thing where you nervous laugh with everybody, but on the inside you're mortified. And since that happened, I've never liked reading out loud. I really don't like reading, and I'm open about that, but I found a way to turn it into a positive for myself. I write. I write so I can control the narrative. I write so I can choose the words that I want to use, and I don't have to feel this pressure that I'm going to open a book and mispronounce something. You know, that's something I still struggle with every day. I'm 19 years old now, and there are many words that I come across that sometimes are just hard for me to pronounce. And, you got to just keep moving forward with it, and I try not to let it bother me too much, but I'd be lying if I said I avoided reading out loud at almost all cost. I call Learning to Love Me a musician's song just because it's got a bit of a unique structure to it. There's not really a bridge, there's not really a pre-chorus. It was kind of one of those songs, I broke a lot of rules when writing it. I just wanted to tell a story. I wanted to have, lyrics with great imagery. I had this whole vision in my head for it, and even though maybe it's not the most commercial song on the project, I do think that other musicians will relate to sort of how it was written and why I made the choices I made. So I think a big part of growing up is, changing in appearance. And for me, I think, a lot of people go through this sort of ugly phase and puberty where nothing fits right and your face is weird and you've got all these strange things going on. And then, as people like to call it, sort of this glow up happens. You kind of come out of those, middle school, early high school years. You start to turn 17, 18, 19, and you start to look really different. It's almost like things start to fall back into place that were previously sort of jumbled up, almost like puzzle pieces. You've got a puzzle as a child and you fit perfectly, and then everything gets scrambled and it turns into something completely new when you're finally an adult. And so for me, I think it was just time. It took me a while to, be confident in myself again. There are still a lot of days where I wake up and I am, not loving what I'm looking at in the mirror. I still have acne, I still have those things, but the person sitting here today sat in hair and makeup for 2 hours to do this. So I don't want to give anyone a false impression of what I look like. There's a lot that you can do with lighting, mirrors, makeup, hair, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, though, if you take it all away, we all look pretty similar, I think.